My name is Jo Tacky. I'm moderating this session, which essentially means keeping it to time and making sure everyone who has a question gets a chance to ask one and has a microphone to do so because of the filming. So I'm not going to waste time with any preamble. I'm going to first of all get a show of hands. Who has got a burning question following the talk earlier? I thought it might be. Ah, here, we have one. Well done. Wait, hold on a sec. Wait for the microphone, please. Okay.
Excuse me. Sorry. Could you get me a glass of water? Yeah, thanks.
Okay, please, go ahead.
I was just saying, not necessarily a burning question, but one of the things that piqued my interest about what you were talking about was the responsibility of potentially AI and its use and the auditing of it to make it transparent so you can ensure ownership is assigned. Is there any chance you just expand on that a little bit?
Sure. I'm slightly tempted to go show you guys the remaining 5 slides since there's... Really? You guys want that?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. It's the answer to the question anyway, so I may as well. Do you mind?
So you want to...
Show them the last 5 slides which to answer that question.
Is that... It's being filmed.
Yeah, okay.
Is that okay?
All right.
Yeah.
Sure? Okay. All right, cool. Good thing I didn't throw the...
If you want to load your deck, then I'll swap the presentation over. And there's a clicker on the...
So while we're prepping for that, any other questions?
Yeah, it's like load me up with the questions so I can show you the answers about that.
Someone else with a burning question? Or any question?
I'm going to really surprise that guy by doing this. Okay. Nobody? I can't believe, I guess I'm that clear.
No, I think it's just, we'll warm up. Okay, we've got 2 questions right next to each other. So first of all, yes, do you want to ask yours?
Okay.
So microphone. Brilliant, thanks.
Great. I would be mainly interested in how we engage with the big corporations and the policy. I mean, that is a big question.
Yes, there's slides about that too. No, that's great.
Excellent.
Okay.
Yeah, that would be my question.
But actually not enough of one, so we'll come back to that.
That's cool.
So I don't want to spend the whole 5 minutes on this. Yeah, go ahead.
There's another question right behind if you hand the microphone back.
Yeah, and mine is clarification as well, so it might be in this bit, but it's, you know, you said only humans can be accountable, and I guess I kind of lost it there then. There's an issue of transparency, but also in terms of, I guess, responsibility and
right.
What is AI?
Okay, that's great.
So we pause questions there?
I think we should pause on those 4, and I'll try to answer them really quickly, and I'm not going to do all the slides. But this is just an idea of the kinds of questions that we want government to be able to help us with, right? So is the law being deliberately violated, or have citizens or visitors? Actually, nations are responsible for anyone inside their borders, whether or not they are citizens. So were they harmed due to negligence? All right. Whoops. Somehow I'm on the answers, not the. Sorry. That's where we were. Sorry about that. Let's do the questions. All right. So questions. Right. So. Was the law or treaty deliberately violated? And the special cases, are we under a persistent attack right now, which arguably democracy is? If one definition of war is if your enemies are, if you reduce the institutions of your enemy in such a way that it loses autonomy with respect to you. So if you thought that some people were upset about, say, NATO, then you might consider that Brexit and Trump are really good, are literally we're dismantling our own institutions from the inside. And if anybody from outside did that, then that would definitely be an act of war. Let's see, as I just mentioned about coming to harm due to negligence. And finally, is there anything that's changed in the world that requires new resources? And this is, I learned this from the guy, Landau, is actually when the EU was 7 guys in a room, he was the French one. And I happened to see him speak in Princeton. I never heard government described so simply as this before. Select a problem, address it with resources, and then try to stabilize and move on to the next problem. And I think the stabilizing is actually the thing that ICT is disrupting. But anyway, so back to the actual question. How do we get accountability in AI? A lot of people are worried that if I call for regulation, then I'm saying no deep learning or something. No, that's not what I'm saying. And I have a recent blog post on this. It's something like 6 kinds of explanation, 1 is useless. And I recommend that for the long version of this, but I will try to make this short. But this is just saying, look, all AI is software, all right? Yes, the hardware has a role. We heard about the bodies, but it all involves software. And so we ought to know, like, what are the components? There's people saying, like, literally people from MIT, this is like mind exploding. The future of life people at MIT say, what if you had a chess program and notice you're shutting it off overnight and it shoots you, right? Okay, no chess program has a representation of night in it. And it certainly is not connected to a gun. That's an architectural decision. When you design the system, you say chess program. Does it need a gun? No. All right? Also, anybody who actually programmed would know that all programmers want the computer to do stuff overnight. Nobody would shut off a computer overnight. That's like such a statement of ignorance coming out of an MIT affiliated thing. It just drives me insane. Anyway, so yes, we have to architect the system. We have to secure the system, and this is a big deal that people aren't. Seda Girza wrote a really great paper about this, and Frank Pasquale talked about this with respect to machine learning libraries. You need to know where you got your stuff, or else nobody can trust your software, even if you're trustworthy, because you weren't careful enough, right? So, but then you document what you did. Anyone who's a developer here knows you're supposed to do this. We just don't always do it because we're too busy, right? But you're supposed to do this, and it helps you, because you can go back and figure out what you did, and you can maintain your own software. But it doesn't only help you. So who was the person who asked that question? I am terrible with names and faces, and I apologize in advance for anyone that I failed to remember. Just tell me the story. But anyway, whoever asked that question, this is the main thing that I'm arguing is, remember, only humans can be accountable. So, and also remember that AI is definitionally an artifact. So someone did something, and they ought to be able to show you they followed good process, right? This is what we do with banks. We don't walk into banks and say, explain to me the synapses in your accountants, right? They say, show us the accounts, right? So we need to know that they followed good process, right? And then for machine learning, as I mentioned, you have to do that with the data libraries and the model parameters, and you log the inputs and decisions of operational systems, right? That's why we all know exactly what happened with that Uber car. You know, in 2 days, we all knew. You get people helicoptering in from Microsoft. Then Microsoft turned on a dime. I think it was 2016, maybe it was 2017. From helicoptering in their devs saying, oh, if you're going to shoot the goose with the golden eggs if you regulate us, to saying, oh yeah, transparency, clarity, accountability, right? But before they did that, they would say, you know, but you know, this is impossible. We know it's possible because driverless cars is some of the most complicated AI out there, yet we can find out how the crashes happened 2 days later in the front page of the newspaper. Why? Because the automotive industry destroys unbelievable numbers of lives, and so therefore it's somewhat well regulated, and so we have these accounts. All right? Yeah, I'm a biker. Can you tell I'm a biker? Anyway, cyclist, sorry. Already, yeah, I just said that. Okay. Yeah, this was, nobody asked this question, so I'll skip over it quickly, but I don't think this is just about ICT. Oh, somebody did ask this. They asked me about how do we reel in tech, big tech. I've talked to a lot of big tech. I also talked to medium-sized tech. I talked to the small companies in Bath. But Facebook and Google get this. They know something has to change. Microsoft has not, at least the individual representatives, some of them just freak out. They're like, but we gave $560 million to the poor, to affordable housing in Seattle. Look, the federal government of America used to give that much every year to just Seattle alone, right? That was back when people paid taxes, pre-90s, right? So it is not sufficient for a tech giant once in a blue moon. And there are rumors, I don't know if this is true, that Facebook said when they got angry that there might be like an Airbus for Facebook in Europe, that when Facebook heard that they said, okay, we're no longer going to support your journalism if you do that. We're going to cut off our support to your academia and journalism. You can't have that. That's what government is for. Again, it's a way you put the money that you owe because you've got something good. I mean, you deserve to have some of that money, right? But a portion of it comes back into sustaining and improving the infrastructure that allowed you to be the person you are in the first place, the company you are in the first place, all right? So anyway, Facebook people seem to get it, and I just heard recently through a back channel that Microsoft is going, oh, maybe we should look into this. And they're asking someone, not me, they should ask me, but to explore it for them. But anyway, I think the tech giants are actually a natural alliance for liberal democracies because their entire business model involves having a lot of people that have decent educations, that have access to the internet, that have enough money in their pocket that people will pay to have them click, right? That we are their eyes and ears. We are actually their users, sort of. We are their customers. We are bartering data with them, okay? Which is a way that they're again avoiding taxes because they're bartering data. But I think we should be getting them on our side. So I like the international digital the digital tax thing that France proposed. In fact, it looks quite like something I wrote for the OECD and a French person took over. But I don't like it being applied just to digital. I think we need to think about the transnational problems in general, and that the digital might be those guys who will be enough of the elite that will coalition with us, the proletariat, as a model that I mentioned earlier. All right? So then the idea here is that and I just tell judges this, and they go, oh, really? You know, if we say, look, you have to prove that you followed best practice and you avoided worst practice and those kinds of things, if we just say that, then the companies will choose how much transparency. They'll decide whether they feel safe with deep learning or not, that they would be able to defend themselves. And I think they should be able to, because it's a well-understood algorithm, and they can show how they used it and whether they followed good practice, right? But anyway, that's my basic argument. Transparency is a property of the system. Accountability is the thing that gets companies to care about transparency. All right? So back to the answers of government. Yeah. They should be able to prove it hasn't been or be held accountable. Were citizens or visitors harmed? Yeah, same thing, right? Negligence isn't that different from deliberate violation. Has something fundamentally changed? Yes. And I think we need to get expertise into the governments to be able to inspect these accounts. Now, when I give these talks in London, I just heard somebody sort of say this just here, but in London, people start drooling. They're like, ooh, a new thing we could do, like assurance and stuff like that. London loves this, right? but yeah, no, seriously, it's something to go into thinking about. And I think we need to figure out transnational cooperation. I think the EU is really flawed. Everything is flawed, but a really interesting model where the nations are the ones that have the borders, that have the responsibilities, that have the tax money, that have the executive, that have the laws, that have the courts, right? And then the transnational thing just negotiates so that they harmonize those laws and courts between each other. I think that's a nice model. I'd like to see more people using it. Okay, and that was actually the end of the talk, and it answered at least 3 of the questions. I have the feeling that I may have missed one, so go ahead and ask that question again.
So, any questions not answered so far, amongst the 3 that have already been asked? Are you satisfied with that? Okay, so we've got some more questions. So 1 here in the front, 2 over there, and 1 here. So we go in that order. So you first, then you. So maybe we'll take all 4 and see if...
I could do questions all day.
We're going to run out of time. We've only got 6 minutes
Okay, I'll try
left.
to do them quickly.
Joanne, we spoke briefly about this in the break, but I think it's a question that maybe others also have, and that was when you showed the slide on growing the pie and sharing the pie, it seemed to me seemingly opposing the entire climate crisis, which is saying something very different about maintaining what is left, and we can't. I know we can't grow overnight iron and certain minerals and things. So I wondered if you could just expound upon this idea of growing and sharing the pie and maintaining the pie.
Yeah. Okay. Remember, I'm just going to violate this really quickly to say this. That slide actually said sustainability and inequality. And so, and the growing the pie was in double quotes. So I take on board what you're saying, that growth is the wrong metaphor, but it is literally about people thinking, do they have enough or a rich enough slide? So if you look at some of my writings about this, my more recent writings, I say things like, there's sustainable goals for improvement, because we always want to improve our life, right? But like having more and better art in your room is sustainable. Having, well, depending on what kind of art it is, of course. But having ever larger rooms for the same number of people is not sustainable, right? So we have to think about these kinds of things. But I take your criticism on board. Thanks.
Okay.
Yeah, hi. Thanks, Joanna, for your talk. One of the slides that you just showed was saying how government's responsibility would be to figure out whether law has been deliberately violated. I guess that takes into consideration that law needs to be established in the first place, and thus requires regulation. Bureaucracy hasn't been known to move at the same speed of technology, and so given the speed of technology and its implications on our society, how do our governments keep up and provide proper regulation?
Okay.
So can we just take the remaining 2 questions quickly? And sorry, can you keep your questions fairly brief? Yes.
So mine was a lower level one on the software audit idea, which is whether you've given any thought to what that actually looks like in practice, given that financial audit is quite a relatively limited and constrained by law review and scope for a certain class of stakeholder.
Right.
And here.
Hi, Joanna. I'm looking for some hope. Can you tell a little bit about what are the kind of things you're very excited about, some hopeful things that are happening in this area of legislation, and things like that, as well as maybe partially to that, what are some of the potential roadblocks?
Great question to end on about hope. So can you... Okay,
so I'll try to get all 3 of these very quickly, and also now, this is like this cognitive challenge to remember what all the questions are. One of the things that we've come to the conclusion in the UK, and the UK is actually leading, as far as I can tell, on these implementations and rapidly scaling up. We were the first ones with national level soft law, incidentally. The principles of robotics were written in 2010 and published in 2011. And look a lot like the new OECD G20 rules that were signed up to by lots of countries, 42 countries for the OECD, and then the entire G20 signed up to them too. And more countries are coming online with that. Anyway, so mostly we've come to the conclusion we don't need a lot of new laws, right? So law is built around these kinds of problems. So it is more about that we need the expertise to implement the existing laws, like I said, of following the best practice. So you have to establish what is the best practice in a domain, and then make sure that people have followed it, right? So it isn't so much that we need the micro detail in the legislation. It's more that we just need to have the regulatory bodies set up so that we can apply existing manufacturing obligations and corporate responsibilities into the software industry where they hadn't been applied before. So most of the legislation is about building up, and the EU's already required this. Every nation is supposed to have a regulatory body, and so is the EU itself supposed to have a central one. And Britain has already complied, as it always does, with the EU law, and then claimed it was its own idea. But we already do have some really interesting hires and groups that are doing useful things on stuff like targeted. They're doing both proactive, but I would expect coming on to the second question that there will be this reactive component too, where people are going to complain and say, oh, it looks, like with the various class action things that happened in America, where you need, part of the problem with AI violations is that you don't know if you've just been unlucky or you've been bad or something. You need to have a bunch of people say, wait a minute, we all got turned down, from this kind of situation. So it does take some kind of organization, but we're already seeing some of that. So we probably need both, maybe a little bit of proactive auditing, regular audits, but probably it'll be more reactive that people complain and come forward with it. No, I haven't got into the nitty-gritty on it. I am not the expert, but I almost guarantee you that they're working on this in the new organizations in London. If you look at, I retweet them once in a while, but I am terrible with names. I can't. But there's these new offices of artificial intelligence. So I think if you go, now is a great time to engage with that kind of question too, because they want to get this right. So I would say that was a really informed question, and I encourage you to, and if you have trouble finding them, just email me about it, and I'll try, and if I don't answer, email me again the following week. But I'll try to connect you to one or two of the people, because they tend to come and talk to me and get me to go talk. I got to talk in this really cool room that's called the Churchill Room. It was pretty cool. Yeah, it was a big deal, apparently. Somebody else, was it Trump? I think Trump actually insisted to see that room, but I got to talk in it. But anyway, so what was the third question?
It was hope, and we've just got enough time for you to...
Well, I think what we do matters. I am afraid, but every so often I hear like really great things that makes me think, like for example, in the sustainability front, that somebody just says, oh, you know, if we do this, then we have this huge way to push back on the biodiversity crisis, you know. So I'm particularly concerned about the ecological crisis. I think everybody should be. I wouldn't be surprised. Okay, yeah, this is hope. I wouldn't be surprised at all if we're not flying in 5 years. Partly because of the climate crisis itself is making the planes too choppy, and there's going to be more civilian deaths. And then, you know, but I think there's really, really big changes are coming, and I think it's already too late for, you know, people in Syria. So I don't want to, but on the other hand, life is really good at persisting. So I'm absolutely confident, you know, this is why I can't get money from Jan Tallinn, even though he seems to like me. I absolutely think there will be people in 10,000 years. I just think that it really, really matters what we do to try to, you know, keep the boat as smooth as possible, suffer the mass killings as few as possible, keep the biodiversity while there's still like memory in the ecosystem so that it can restore itself. That we really need to start defending that much harder. But I think there is a lot of hope, because AI is a communication technology. When good ideas are there, I think that when you have high inequality, you get, the autocracy is like the weeds. High inequality means government has failed. And when it's like you've disturbed a bunch of earth, and then the weeds come in. But then the weeds restabilize enough that you can get a rich ecosystem. So I think we will come up with a new way to govern. I'm just trying to help do it smoothly, smoothly and cleanly. But I guess the biggest stumbling block I'm worried about is surveillance. I think the era of besides biodiversity, the era of privacy by anonymity is just over. And so we have to get into privacy by defense, that even though we could be predicted, we wouldn't be predicted. Just like people could break into our houses, the government, the police. But yeah, fortunately, some piece of good news. The policewoman that walked into somebody else's house and shot him is going to jail. So yeah, hopefully when people use our data incorrectly, we can recognize that, and we can get them in trouble. And I think that's a big technical challenge that we have to work on.
Okay, so I'm really sorry to wrap it up. I know it didn't run as long as it was originally planned, but that's because we started first, and the next session starts at 1:45. And so these are the three separate sessions again. So perhaps we can just thank Joanna again. Thank you.